So I'm actually, I graduated in computer science. I did my engineering with two majors. One was actually robotics. The other one was database management systems. I have no idea now how I actually went around selecting those two majors, but somehow I did. They don't they don't have a lot of synergy between them. Why would you do robotics and computer science, right? But since then, I've actually been in IT. I've been in the technology space. I have worked mostly in the life sciences or pharmaceutical industries for the last 20 so years. I started off my career with a company called Biogen. Anybody knows of Biogen? They're pretty large in Massachusetts. Spent close to around 12 years over there, different roles, business roles, IT roles, management, leadership roles. After which I actually joined Alnylam 5 years back. When I joined Alnylam 5 years back, there really wasn't anything like AI. We didn't really have generative AI. Actually, the world did not have generative AI. What we had was machine learning and computer algorithms. And we used this to actually find drugs, develop them, test them in patients, and actually bring them to the market. How many people are familiar with kind of like the pharmaceutical industry today? Not a lot? That's okay. I'll walk us through. Well, let's kind of kick off, right? It's kind of like what really is kind of like AI? Because we see it like pretty much everywhere, every day, on the news, on social media, LinkedIn. You cannot look. So we had this joke going on at my company, right? It's like, who is going to be more famous, Taylor Swift or AI? And for a while, we actually had a bet going where we were actually looking at the number of impressions, is what we call it, but it's actually the number of posts on social media for AI versus Swift. And this is actually a neck to neck match. So this kind of goes into my next topic, but I'll actually come to that later, right? But let's talk about kind of like what is really AI? So AI is not new. It's actually been around for decades. We just used to call it something else. We used to call it machine learning. We used to call it robotic process automation, or we actually used to call it natural language generation, which is the ability for a machine to speak like a human. And we actually use this on a daily basis, whether we know it or not. When we call a bank and you hear that prompt that says, please speak your social security number or your bank account number, 99% of the time, that's actually a machine that's asking you the question. That's actually a machine that's actually listening to what you're saying and entering into a computer. But what really changed is the last 6 months to a year when OpenAI hit the market. When all of a sudden we saw this amazing new technology come up called ChatGPT. Nobody really used to use computers before to ask it to build pictures or to write poems or to actually write papers or do your college essays. Right? And honestly, we do it too. Even in the business, we actually use this to do a lot of writing for us. But this is where the game changed. It actually changed from AI being behind these corporate firewalls and all of these data centers and all of these technology companies like Google and everything, right up front in the face of everybody, saying, here is a technology that can actually be like a human. So here we are today, right? We now actually have computer algorithms that can actually simulate how we think, how we speak, how we write. You can ask it to be Da Vinci, you can ask it to be Shakespeare, and it can actually do both. which if you think about it is amazing. So this is what Gen AI or AI now brings to the table, is the ability to actually simulate a human being and actually be reasoning with us. I think there was some paper that came out, right, maybe a few months back, that actually said that an AI algorithm actually passed the bar exam. And now they're actually having AI compete in SATs as well as actually medical exams. And in a lot of cases, it's actually passing really well. But then how do you really take this technology, right? And how do you really take it from the way we use it today, where we use ChatGPT or Gemini or any one of these AI algorithms to write college essays and do a homework, to actually how do we really use it in business? And this is where the challenge comes. Is you could be using ChatGPT on your phone and you can ask it to write you a thank you note or for a friend or something. But can you really use that in business? Because there is a specific need within a business, and that's actually to make money and to add value and to contribute to society as a whole. So, how do you kind of use AI for that purpose? How do you use it to increase what we call as the collective intelligence of the organization? How do you use it as a force multiplier? Where if 10 people can do 10 units of work, if you add AI to it, can you now take it from 10 to 20 to 50 to 100? How is that possible? So that's what we're going to talk about today, right? Is how do you actually take AI and use it within a business environment? Let me pause here. Let me see if there's any questions in the room. No? Everybody knows how to use AI in business?
Not me.
Maybe I can think of maybe something. I don't know if that's something that we can use.
Yeah.
You can use an AI to, let's say, if you're in a production, manufacturing, or let's say a restaurant, take an
Yep.
example, you need to predict your market.
Yep.
You can
So
use
that's a
it.
great example. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So within the drug manufacturing field, right? And to your point, AI can actually be used to understand how much yield you'll actually get from something. So previously, this actually required spreadsheets and spreadsheets of information, where people would actually have to put their minds and pencils to paper and say, okay, if I take, let's say, 100 liters of water and add 200 liters of something else, what do I get? Do I get 300 liters or do I get 400 liters or 100 liters? Very simple example of how do you calculate yield within manufacturing for a drug company. With AI, you can actually run multiple algorithms, multiple scenarios. You could actually put in something like, say, okay, if there's a Texas storm in Texas, what's going to happen to my manufacturing? If there is some supply chain disruption happening in Japan, how does that really impact my environment?
For
Sorry?
you to get becomes more difficult for you to get what you need.
Hmm?
Becomes more difficult for you to get your stuff.
Well, no, the reason is because all of these decisions or predictions we actually make on a daily basis requires vast quantities of data. And as humans, we can only calculate so much, right? Our capacity in terms of memory and the ability to compute all this memory is very limited. But for a machine, it's so easy. I think you were the one who was mentioning, right? Google was able to solve this problem that takes 47 years into something like seconds, right? So that's actually the power of AI, is the ability to actually take petabytes and petabytes of information, churn through it, and come up with decisions that actually would take years and years for a human. Any other examples of how do you use AI. I think somebody was mentioning audit surveyor, right? All the way in the back.
Yes.
Yeah. So give me one example of where you think you can actually use AI in an audit environment.
Not quite sure.
Maybe sampling?
Hmm?
Maybe
Maybe
sampling?
sampling. Yep.
Um,
And I'll give you an example, right? So here's an example, right? Take a company like GE that's been here for decades. Take a scenario where if somebody were to come to you and say, okay, show me all of the audit findings for GE in the last 20 years, how long would it take?
long time.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But this is what AI can do.
Mhm.
You could take every audit report,
Mhm.
internal audits plus external audits, feed it into a computer, and AI will actually give you a response in less than an hour. It will give you not just a list of all of the audit findings, but also how to actually close those findings. And the reason is just because, like I said before, right, is because computers have the ability to process petabytes of information in seconds that we as humans possibly cannot do. Right? What AI also changes is how we interact with computers. To date, right, or until Gen AI came along, we were the ones who were actually telling computers what to do. Computers weren't really telling us what to do. We were giving instructions. We were saying add 2 plus 2 equal to 4. What changes now? Now you can actually go into AI and say, write me 20 questions to ask on a math exam. Right? You can actually have AI write you an exam paper. But you can also have AI answer the exam. So all of this now changes, right? Another thing to consider with AI is until date, humans have created all of the data and images and content in this world. We as people have been the content creators. Pictures, essays, notes, you name it. What changes now is we now have a machine that's actually creating content. So just think of the possibility of what that changes and how much more information will actually be created in the world with a machine continuously generating content and information for us. And what we got to figure out is how do we use this to our benefit?
So what are its limits?
Hmm?
What are its limits?
It's a great question, and that actually hasn't been determined yet. Right? I came across this great quote by actually one of the founders of Google, right? Where the whole conversation started is you now have this, we'll call it the beast, right? You have this beast of a machine, which is super powerful, right? How do you regulate it? The question is, how do you regulate something you don't even know what it can possibly do?
Yeah, because they're trying to come up with legislation in Connecticut right now about AI.
The European Union actually just came up with a regulation called the AI Act. The AI Act kind of puts some limits around how you can use it, but it still doesn't put a limit on what it can do. Right? And the US government is working on the same, and pretty much every government in the world is actually working on some kind of a regulation on how do you use AI. How do you use it correctly? How do you use it for the benefit of society versus otherwise?
Ethically.
Hmm?
Ethically.
Yeah, ethically, that's actually a huge thing. Absolutely, yep. So this is one of the challenges we face today, right? Is how do you use AI? How do you use AI from basically saying, hey, build me an image or write me a poem, to how do I really use it in the world to actually create value and benefit society? That's basically what it is how do you switch from something that's academic or something that's used within a personal use to actually use for society? And there's different ways to do this, right? There's one of the ways to do this is actually you really go to strategize, you go to think. You can't just say, I'm going to pick this up and use it for this purpose. You actually really, within a business, you have to think about the entire business context. You actually have to think of what we call as a strategy. You look across. You look across and you say, this is where I think AI will add the most value. Is AI going to add value in answering exam questions? Or is AI going to add value, right, in really building those questions? Or can we use AI to actually find if somebody used AI to answer exam questions? So I recently did a course on AI at MIT, and MIT is one of those companies or colleges, right, that's always wants to be ahead of everybody else. They have actually figured out a way by which they can actually detect if you used AI. Not only that, that was actually one of the things, right? The other thing they've actually done is they've actually changed the way they actually ask questions within an exam, where you can use AI. So even if you try to use AI, you can. So this is how the whole space has evolved, right? You got to really strategize. You got to think of how you're going to do it. But just having a strategy is not enough. You actually need to have what we call as governance and a process by which you can actually keep it going, ongoing. How do you keep it ongoing? How do you keep evolving it? Because AI is also changing. And this is more like a cat and mouse game, right? As the technology changes, we have to keep evolving to keep up with the technology.
So would you say that AI capacity could supersede the human brain at some point?
Well, I think it depends how you look at it. If you look at it in terms of how much can it remember, it did that decades ago.
I'm sorry.
How much can it remember? How much memory it has? It did that decades ago, right? Computers have been able to store a lot more information than humans possibly can, right? Can it compute faster than a human? Yes. And the reason we know that is because actually AI, which used to be called machine learning, built the grandmaster at chess decades ago. The key question over here, right, is can it reason better than a human? How good is its reasoning power? Does it really know good versus bad? So those are the questions that need to be asked now.
Are they not already using AI in medical diagnoses?
Yep.
Where a doctor will actually see things based on what the AI is suggesting and then make a decision?
Absolutely. Absolutely, right? So we have an example where within our company, we are a drug manufacturer. Patient safety is our utmost priority within the industry. For every drug product or every pill, we actually don't use pills, but I'll use that as an example. For every pill, right, we track the safety. Every time there is a complaint, we track the complaint, we put it into a database, we triage it, we make sure this complaint is resolved, and we actually report all of this to the FDA. When we used AI to do this, we actually found that AI actually did a 30% better job than a human. And this is based on actual numbers. Right? So the question that comes up then, right, is will AI replace humans? And the answer is actually no. It will not. What AI can actually do is it can actually be a force multiplier. It can actually help a human do the job much better, much faster, and actually make more time available for more creative stuff and more reasoning stuff, and actually to build more AI. Coming back to kind of like, how do you really select, right, within a business context? How do you select where I'm going to use AI? And you have to think across the entire business environment. Taking the example of drug manufacturing or pharmaceuticals, you actually start all the way at the very beginning, which is I'm going to start in research, which is where scientists actually find molecules that actually treat disease. But that is just not enough, right? You go on to the next step, which is now you're going to take the drug, which we call as a candidate, you have to test it out. Everybody must have heard of this term called clinical trials, right? So you actually have to test it out. You have to test it out in animals, you have to test it out in humans. And then once you have sufficient evidence that the drug works, the FDA grants you approval to sell it. So you really have to look across the entire business cycle and figure out where AI is actually going to add value. Once you figure that out, you then need to know, is it really worth spending all that money and time and effort? Because if I were to take $1 million and use it on technology, that $1 million could have been spent on either finding drugs or treating patients. So there's always this question that's going to keep coming up is what is the risk versus reward? What is the feasibility of actually doing this successfully? You then need to focus on exactly what problem you're going to solve. It's just not enough within a business to say, I'm going to use AI. So to use the example, right, is can I use AI for drug discovery? Yes, but what part of drug discovery? Can I use AI within a college? Yes, absolutely you can use AI within a college. But for what real purpose? Because that is where you will have success. There's a lot of things you got to consider though, once you go down the AI journey. The one of the most important pieces that people really don't mention, right, is it's still about people. You have to have, right, the right people to do this. And within a, well, let's forget about a company, right? When you start using something, you use it for an objective, you use it for a specific purpose to meet a specific need. I buy a car not because I want to have a car, but because I want to go from place A to place B, right? You apply the same thing to anything, especially when it comes to technology investments within a business. It is super important to know what is the business need you're going to solve. Who can think of one example within your environment of like business needs where you'd need AI, like, other than writing homework?
Let's say in business, like for applications, like filing out and filtering out applications.
Okay, yep,
Probably data analytics.
yep.
Looking at
So this
numbers,
is where you have to be specific.
looking at numbers and looking at charts, making predictions.
Okay,
How about aiding in decision making? Aiding in decision making?
yeah, that would be a great use case. Yep. To help write code. That is excellent, actually. Yes, yes, yeah. So that is a great example, right? Where we use it today to write code within our company. And one of the things that you hear about a lot in the news is that AI is going to write all the code for us in the world. It's actually not going to do that. So if there's anybody here in computer science, right, like you are, right, AI is not going to write code. You're still going to be writing code. What AI is going to do is actually you're going to be able to write small pieces of code with AI.
So basically, a lot of things that I've noticed with AI, at least, is that it's really good for time-consuming projects. So anything that's like, say, you have to keep writing like multiple if statements at the same time. But if you want to spread out its like workflow and such, if you're using it during like a busy portion of the day, it actually gets lazy with its answers as well. So you have to be very careful with the information you're taking from it. It's also great as a learning tool as well.
Correct.
And I've been using it to like teach myself how to do things rather than just have it do the things that I want it to do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, brilliant! Yeah. So there's actually hundreds and hundreds of applications, right, for AI. in any environment, but you really have to consider a couple of key important facts. One is, do you really have the data available to actually use technology? And this is super important because bad data can lead to bad decisions. If you don't have good data and you start using technology on that, you're probably going to be in a lot of trouble because you're going to actually have a machine making decisions or predicting results, right, that are not accurate. Like I said before, right, everything has a cost, especially within a business environment. We always have to weigh what is the cost of doing this and what is the benefit of doing this. It's called the ROI, return on investment. Because the same money you spend on A could be used for B. And you have to run those comparisons, even with AI. Right? And the other most important piece is, what industry are you in? Right? Within the pharmaceutical industry, we have very strict regulations. We have the FDA, we have the EMEA, we have the Japan, we have so many different government regulatory agencies that actually define what we can do, what we cannot do. Hence, can we use AI throughout? Possibly not. You could be in the retail industry, you could be in the transportation industry, and the regulations might be different. You also have to be aware of what your competitors are trying to do.
But wouldn't it help you pull you back in and say, whoa, you're going past the regulation, you can't do that? Wouldn't that be a use for it? To like keep you clean, keep you within the
Yeah.
regulations?
Yeah. So this is where it's getting really interesting with AI at this point. And like I think you mentioned, right, regulations. You mentioned regulations. Somebody mentioned regulations, right? Or the limits of AI, actually. In our industry, even the FDA is trying to catch up to this. And it's happening everywhere, even in the transportation industry, where the technology is evolving so fast that all of these government agencies are catching up and struggling to come up with the regulations on how do you put guardrails and controls around this. And it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while. It's going to be, again, an evolution because this just happened so fast. It just hit the news on day one. By day 10, everybody was super excited. Everybody was using it. Companies started using it. People started using it. And now there will be regulations on how do you control it. Yeah.
So couldn't it be a clause or a constant to say that based on how fast it's moving, sometimes trying to play catch up, like by the time you get to where they were before, you still have like another distance to go because it's evolving so fast. Like they're coming up with more and more and more, so it's growing. So if it's, say for example, it's at 0.7 when it started, and you're like, okay, I'm at a 3. I need 4 more steps to get there. You get to 7, and then it's at 14. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah.
Yep.
So how, I don't know, how would you advise, or what would be like one of the things, like a game changer for companies? What did they do?
Yes. So I actually do have one last slide, so I'll talk about it back there, right, as part of lessons learned. This speaks exactly about that.
All right.
Yeah. But one of the things that's kind of like evident is that AI is here to stay, right? Every time I look across, I look at the news, I talk to a lot of people in the industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, in the technology industry, all the way from Google to Microsoft to Amazon and so on, right? Everybody right now is aligned that AI is here to stay. It's going to be a game changer, right? And we have to learn how to use it. This is not a technology we can kind of slide under the carpet and say, I'm not going to worry about this for the next 3 years, or I'm going to wait to see how this shapes up. And this became extremely evident, right? When the White House, a couple of months back, actually issued an executive order on how to use AI. I mean, think about it. How many times in this history have you seen the White House write an executive order on a piece of technology. At least in my lifetime, I have never seen that happen. Right? The European Union actually came up with a legislation in 6 months on technology. This is something that actually takes years because the European Union is not one country. So for all of them to get together and say, you know what, we need to do something about it. We need a legislation. We need some guardrails. We're going to work on it and we're going to do it. So this tells a lot, right, about AI and what AI can do and what its future potential is. I did touch upon this, which is governance, right? And governance has two pieces to it. The first piece, right, of governance is how do you make sure that actually you're using it? And when you're using AI, you're actually getting value out of it. And what really is value? So, any examples of what really is value? No? Okay. So, what value really is, right, is one, are your objectives being met? If you came up and said, okay, I'm going to use AI, right, to write the next question paper or the next exam, and I don't know, pick any subject, right? I'm going to use AI to write the next math paper. Did AI really do the good job with that? And did it really help me reduce 4 hours of work time? Or did I end up spending 9 hours versus 4 hours? So did you really get value from using the technology? That's one measurement.
Could you use it to grade, say, essay questions?
That actually, the answer is yes. But how do you know it actually did the right grading?
You don't.
So this is something we struggle with every time we use AI, right? Is can it do it? Typically, the answer is yes, AI can do it, right? It's powerful enough to do pretty much anything. But did it really do it correctly? Did we really get value from what it did, right? And then, can we really do it at scale? And what is scale? Scale is kind of doing something over and over again, growing larger and larger, getting the same results and the same value. Most important piece that comes up with AI is how do we ethically use AI, which is basically saying how do we use AI actually for the good of society versus use AI for harmful purposes. There's a lot of legislation that's happening. There's a lot of companies working on this. We must have seen this all over the news recently, where there have been these negative outcomes of using AI. And today, a lot of this has been reactive, but every company is trying to get more and more proactive about this. Changing the technology, they're putting in new rules, guardrails on how do you do it correctly. There's always privacy concerns, right? What really is a privacy concern? Just to give you an example. Yeah.
So for example, like in manufacturing companies, I remember some time ago there was, I think Toyota, they had to like shut down for a minute because like somebody like they hacked into their
Yep.
system.
Exactly.
So that would like
Yep.
pretty much. And then otherwise too, like for people, businesses, I think it would affect like their relationship with customers, like all your information. Think about ordering
Brilliant
online,
point. Yes.
Amazon,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all our information goes out just like that because somebody else, gains
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Great example, right? It's actually customer information, it's company information, it's patent information for a lot of companies, right? Can you have all of your patents fed into an AI and now all of your patents become available to the whole world? Do you want your personal information fed into AI? Do you want your picture put into AI, for example, and then be reused to generate other pictures? Do you want AI creating pictures similar to what you look like? These are all privacy concerns we need to think about, right? So how do you go around putting all of these guardrails and controls? It's not one person, it's not one company, it's actually an entire ecosystem. You actually have to start with the business leaders, the business sponsors is what we call them. You need to have lawyers, you need to have patent attorneys. There's a whole legal system that needs to actually get its wheels turning on AI. Ethics and compliance, I touched upon that. Data security, privacy, right? IT, of course. So all of our big IT vendors, we hear about Google, Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, name it, right? As well as there's actually a lot of training that needs to be done. And what really is training? Yes, the rule. Training for AI is how do you correctly use AI for the right purposes, right? But once you have figured all of this out, right, is when you now go ahead and you say, I'm now going to implement AI. You typically start with what is called as a portfolio. A portfolio is nothing but a list. It is a list of things you want to get done. Once you have your list of what you want to get done, you then now need to say, okay, what am I going to use this for? All of these solutions. I'm either going to use it to automate something. I'm either going to use it to actually improve how I interact with my customers as well as my employees, or I'm actually going to use it to get insights. Insights is how am I going to use technology to predict and answer questions. You need good people to do all this. One of the challenges we face today is there's actually not enough technical expertise available out there. So if anybody is looking for a career in AI, this would be the perfect time to get into it.
And what should they study? What should someone study to enter the field?
Yep. So it would be computer science and data science.
Computer and data science.
The other important field for AI is math and statistics.
A lot of fun stuff.
A lot of fun stuff. Yeah. Yes. There's also going to be a huge need for people on the business side who can really understand not just the technology, but how to correctly use it. And how do you really apply AI in a business? It's going to require good knowledge and education about different business industries, pharmaceutical industries, transportation industries, how those businesses work, and have that mindset, not just to know what needs to get done today, but what is getting done today and how technology can actually make it better, or how AI can actually make it better.
Yeah, so even as a lawyer, like I do believe in the future, as companies start integrating AI, they will need even legal departments who focus only on AI. So even if you're a lawyer, you can like concentrate on AI, provide that in the future when companies start using it more.
Yep, absolutely, yes. Yep, even the role of the legal department, right, will change with AI. Because what AI can do today is I can go into AI and I can actually ask it to write me a legal clause. I could actually take an entire legal document. I can put it into AI today and I can say, hey, I'm not a lawyer. Tell me what this means. And AI will tell you in plain language, right, what that is. So think in terms of how, to use your example, right, the role of a lawyer changes with AI. Because AI is going to automate a lot of this. But what AI is not going to automate is the negotiations that come with the legal field. The planning, the strategy, none of that will go away.
You said something interesting because I can envision at some point one company having a set of data from AI
Yep.
competing with another company that has data from AI,
Right.
and the two AI are coming together and trying to decide, which is the best avenue to.
Well, so that's already happening. That actually is already happening
It's
in a lot
happening
of
already?
cases. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. The law firms were actually the first to start adopting this technology because what do they have to deal with? They have to deal with boxes and boxes of documents to read. You can take all of this information, you put it in AI, right? And you have the machine do the work for you. And all of these law firms have caught up to this technology. They know they can use this, they know it's actually readily available.
So are they using it for like case law now to go back and research all the cases that could affect the outcome of the case they're currently
Well,
handling?
so what AI will do is it will actually give you options, but it's still up to the lawyer to know which one. So think of it as kind of what we call as kind of creating the first draft or multiple drafts. And then you have a person go through them, right, and make the final decision. The key phrase over here is actually what's called as human in the loop. So every time you use AI, you have to have a human as part of the process to make the final decision. You can't have technology make the final decision for you.
Can AI make an error?
Can make a what?
Can it make an error? Can it be
It
wrong?
makes a lot of errors. It makes a lot of errors all the time. Right? But it's really good at kind of covering itself too. It makes it sound so confident that unless you're an expert, a lot of times you won't even detect it.
So that means if it makes an error, that means every result that AI produces, we still need to go as human beings scrutinize that to make sure.
You have to, absolutely.
So like a computer, it's only as good as the input you put in.
That's what I said. It's all about the data.
It's only as good as the user.
It's all about the data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard an anecdote about a court scenario where somebody was using AI to argue with the judge, and finally the judge said, well, you and your AI are not licensed to practice before the bar, because otherwise the guy kept, I don't know, some traffic violation or something, and the guy kept
Correct.
beating him on everything the judge came out with. This guy would and beat him on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you could go into Chat GPT today and you can ask it a question and say, I got the speeding ticket. How do I fight it?
Hmm.
Right? Or you could go into Chat GPT today and say, this is section XYZ of the US law. What does it mean? And it will actually tell you the answer. Right? I actually used it to prepare my taxes this weekend, where I was in TurboTax and I'm trying to figure out what is this deduction? I've never seen it before, right? So I go into ChatGPT and I say, please explain this deduction to me. It did a good job. It actually gave me a link to the IRS website. And it said, this is actually the publication you want to read if you want to confirm.
Wow.
So technically, I did my taxes with AI. Yeah.
You could type in almost any question. And I'm a tax guy. I teach taxes here.
Yeah.
So I mean, if I don't know anything, and I've been doing this stuff for decades,
Right.
but there's updates and there's regulations, and so you could just, as you said, just type in the question and see what comes up,
Absolutely,
and then
yeah.
make a decision from there. So it becomes actually a companion rather than a decision maker.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
The word
Good
is
way to
force
put it.
multiplier. Yeah. Yeah. My exact question was, what is the QBI carryover?
Yeah.
And I had no clue what a QBI.
199A.
So I actually asked ChatGPT, and I'm like, "What is this QBI carryover?" Sorry.
Give me the answer.
But then once you kind of have the right people, you have kind of figured out the right technology, right? You really have to know how you're going to execute. Because it's one thing to have a strategy, it's a completely different thing to know how to execute the strategy. But the good part is this is what companies have been really good at for decades. They have really mastered the skill, right, of how do you take an idea and how do you make it into reality? How do you put it to practical use? A couple of examples of where we can use AI within biopharmaceuticals. I think you mentioned using AI for image analysis. This has actually been done for quite a few years now, where you could actually take an X-ray, you could take a CT scan, you could take a radiology report, you could actually put it into AI and say, hey, tell me what's wrong with this. Does this person have a disease? And AI actually does a really good job at that. I think the average is around 90% accuracy, where in 90% of the cases, it's actually able to spot disease by looking at an image. But now you can actually not just use it for that, but take it to the next level. Can you actually use it to track disease using images? Because if you were diagnosed with something, you probably had an X-ray the first time. Let's say you broke your bone, right? You go for an X-ray, it tells you you have a broken bone. AI can tell you that. You can see it yourself, right? But then you know you have to go for a follow-up, maybe in a month, maybe after a week, right? Depending on how bad it was. Think of a future where, right, you don't need to see the doctor. You basically go to the X-ray, immediately AI tells you whether your bone is healing or not. So this is where you now take, right, technology and you can use it to make our lives better. We all talk about kind of the cost of healthcare, right? One of the costs of healthcare is actually having doctors and staff, right, look at everything. The example I just gave, right? If you can have AI tell you whether your bone is healing or not by itself, would translate into a lot of savings in the medical field. Right? Can you use AI actually to just find drugs? It's possible. Has it been done so far? No. Can it do it? There's hundreds of companies working on this. Can you find AI, right, to actually predict, right, how your clinical trials are going? I don't know if somebody's aware of clinical trials. I'm guessing not, right? But a clinical trial for a pharmaceutical company can cost close to $1 billion in spend. If you can shave that off by just 10%, that's $100 million of savings right there. This is a huge opportunity for us within the industry, right? Can we actually use it, right, for precision medicine, where if AI can find drugs to treat disease, can we really now take the same AI and say, you know what, don't make a Tylenol that can treat 1 billion people. Make a Tylenol specific for you, just for your specific headache. That's it. Right? Has it been done before? No. Is the potential there? Absolutely. Imagine of what a game changer this would be, right? Where everybody has their own personalized medicine in the future to treat exactly the symptoms that you have and the disease that you have. We can also use it for manufacturing, supply chain. I think you mentioned, right? This can be used to predict manufacturing yields. Absolutely, right? We could do it. Right. So when you kind of, at the end of this, right, just think of how you could actually use AI, right, and the power of AI within your context, within education, within whatever field you are studying in. So what did we learn? Right? So I've been doing AI now for close to, well, I would say 6 months in pure AI, but I've been doing machine learning for more than 5 years. Right? But what did we learn? So what we learned is that Rome wasn't built in a day, right? You can't really just take AI, put it in a problem, and your problem is solved. right? How do you really go from, like you said, right, 1.7 to 3 to 14, right? Right? You're really going to start small. You're going to start with what we call as a minimal viable product, something that you basically built, like, you know, in a lab, got it working to a certain extent, and then you basically take it to a group of people and you say, hey, look at this nice little thing I built. Do you think this works? Right? And you start putting a team around it and you say, hey, you're interested. You think like you can make an improvement to this and you can make an improvement to it. Okay, now let's go ahead, right? And build a prototype. And now let's take it to a head of a department and say, hey, look at this nice little prototype we built. It works, it solves a business problem. Can we use it for something? Once you can use it for something, right? Then you can say, you know what, I'm not going to use this to replace what I do today, but I'm actually going to run it in parallel. When I run it in parallel, I'll know whether it does a better job than what I do today. This is how you now start measuring value. Once you start measuring this value, right, you can then say, okay, I'm now going to put this in production, which means I'm going to replace what I do today with this technology. Right? Very important to keep in mind is you have to set the right expectations. This is where a lot of companies fail. Is you make a promise you cannot meet. You have to be realistic and you have to say, this is an experiment, it's going to succeed, it's going to fail. If it fails, we'll pivot to something else, make it better. But you have to set the right expectations of what it can do versus what it cannot do. Using the example of tax, right? What would be the right expectation? The right expectation would be, I'm going to use AI to answer questions on tax I don't know about. The wrong expectation is, I'm going to have AI file my taxes. Right? Because can AI do that? Not today. Can it help me with my taxes? Absolutely, it can. Right?
Question.
Yeah.
So,
Perfect timing.
if you're doing, for example, taxes in another country, can AI help you with that?
The question I don't know because I don't know which AI model is trained on the tax law for every other country. I know it can help with the US taxes, but the tax laws are like different country by country. Yeah.
If the country is using AI itself, the government, then most likely it would be, just
would be,
like
yeah.
we can get our own, yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can't answer that directly, but, yeah.
Yeah, if it's trained on it
Yeah.
and if the country is using it, the government is using it, then absolutely.
With things that are always changing, like gap regulations for taxes, is there a system in place that automatically updates this information to the softwares, or is there a need for manual input to get this new information?
Great question. So there's two things to consider over here, right? One is when you use AI, the AI is going to be trained on a specific set of data. And this is going to be billions and billions of data. But the amount of computing it requires is millions of dollars, right? I think there was a news report, right, where Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, said he needs like an additional $10 billion or something, or maybe more, right, to train AI. That's what it costs. But what you could do, right, is you could take something that's already trained and then kind of like just fine tune it. You don't have to build it from scratch. So you could take gap laws, and if your model doesn't have gap laws, you can actually say, hey, here's a gap law, go learn it. It's entirely possible.
Yeah, my question is that a gentleman asked about AI could be used in a different country than here. Yeah, simple. I think it's depend on what's the country's use the system. Because I'm kind of like expert. I came from Egypt. It's kind of like taxes different than here, and even percentage or whatever. It's different than here. I came from here, so I know. My second question is that because I have done research about the AI, um, actually AI could be used in many fields right now, and it's kind of like growing all the time. And I have read the article from New Haven registration. I think what is a answer for us or for any who doesn't have much more about the AI or as you are expert computer science. So what's the challenge in the future for the employees? Because the employees kind of like they are kind of like afraid AI is going to take their job, kind of like the world is going to face unemployed people is going to be like a lot. So how we or what's your answer? What's your advice in that?
So that's a very difficult question, right? Because that answering that requires to predict where AI is going to go in the future. As it stands today, AI can't really replace humans completely, right? But the whole space is evolving so fast, right? What we are seeing today is AI is making the job a lot easier, right? We use it to write emails.
That's the plan.
We use it to create PowerPoints within a company, right? Forget everything on the previous slide about finding drugs and all, right? We use it on a daily basis for a lot of things, right? We are having a meeting. We actually have AI write the whole meeting agenda. We hold a meeting. We actually have AI summarize the meeting, capture notes and action items, right? We're using AI to summarize really complex medical publications. Like the example of the legal document, right? Just a month back, the US Patent Office issued guidance on how do you patent inventions created by AI. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't understand it. I put in AI and I said, can AI patent an invention? Right? And AI read the whole document and gave me the answer and said, no, it can't today. But I can't, it's very difficult to predict where it's going to go. Right? I can only speak about like where we are today.
Yeah, I know you're a business person. All of us here, if not all, I mean, most of us, if not all, we're all business related students. Application of AI is going to revolutionize entirely the whole world, including politics. What we can see right now, the political environment right now is very fragile. So, like I said, you're a business person, so I don't know if you can comment on this application of AI in for instance, analyzing that, hey, Mr. Mark is trying to launch a rocket on me. Can I use this AI to help me predict when he's going to do it or when I can intercept this using the AI? Like, I'm very, very careful asking this question because I know you're not a political person, you're a business person. So,
right.
So, what can you say about that?
Well, so I'll use a different example, right? Is can I use AI to predict if my competitor is launching a new product and how successful will that product be? I can do it today. Right? I can use AI to actually predict, right, what my competitor is going to, which next drug they are working on, and how successful will that drug be, and how big is the market.
So I guess like two questions. One would be when it came to learning how to use and implement machine learning and AI in your career. You've been doing this for 5 years now. What were the steps that you took to actually learn and further your knowledge in just using AI? I know it's specific to your career, but how did you just learn to use AI in a better way?
Okay, yeah. So one thing is, I'm not a developer or a coder, right? So when it came to AI, it wasn't really about learning AI. It was more in terms of what is AI, what can it do, and how do you use it. and that is super important, right? Especially for those who are in business, is what it is, what it's the potential it can do, and how do you really apply it within a business.
And then secondly, how do you keep up with, or you personally, how do you keep up with how AI is evolving, like over time, like new uses for it as well?
Short answer is networking. Talk to as many people as you can within your company, within your group, right? Of course, you can always Google it, right? But what's real is going to be knowing what others are doing about this, right? And how they intend to use
I want to take one more question, then it's 2 o'clock, and I'm sure you can hang out.
Yeah.
But my promise to everybody is that, we start at 1, we end at 2. If you want to hang out more, that's fine. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Actually, I just one, I'll come back. So before we end, right, one quick piece of information. Every image in the slide deck was actually built by AI.